Time to go out to the Jim's Firearms Hotline, talk to our guy Luke Johnson, covers the New Orleans Saints for the Advocate. Good enough to give us a few minutes here on this Thursday. Luke, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on, as always.
It is our pleasure, as always. This is unimportant, I think, to most Saints fans, but not to you, and to an extent, not to me. I'm just curious your thoughts. I'm now listening to Kellen Moore talk a good bit. I don't get the sense y'all are going to get a ton of electrifying quotes. Am I fair in my assessment?
I think that is the assessment I am going to carry into the season. Yes, I'm going to not anticipate getting like anything that is going to really generate headlines for NOLA.com from old Kellen Moore.
So the question is, like, have y'all been able to then determine anything about the way he wants to do business around here, and whether or not that's any different than how Dennis Allen handled business?
No, I don't think you really can from his public statements. You know, I think you can get a sense of what he wants his teams to be based on his history as a coach, and what his offenses have been. But in terms of like really like what is his personal philosophy for what this team should look like, I think it's really hard to get a grasp on that before you see it.
I'm curious now, and this is, again, maybe probably a question we can't answer until we see a little bit more, but like, how much influence do you think he has in New Orleans? I think we all feel like Sean Payton carried a pretty big stick when he was walking around. I don't know about Dennis Allen. What's your sense on Kellen Moore?
You know, I think that this is like a really collaborative organization, right? I think like Mickey Loomis is the general manager, but Kai Harley does all the contracts. Mickey Loomis is a general manager, but Jeff Ireland does the college scouting. Yeah, Michael Parrington handles the pro scouting. And I think that extends to the coaching staff too. I think he's going to have a very loud voice in the room because ultimately he's going to be the one that is calling the shots on game day. Is he going to be Sean Payton, like walking around, like controlling his little kingdom? I don't think so. I just don't think that's who he is as a person. But I do think that his voice is gonna carry a long way in that building, even if it's not like this particularly loud voice.
How ready do you think he is, based on what you've been able to gather?
I think he's pretty ready, man. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, later this month when the story drops. But I've spent a good bit of time lately, looking in on him and the kind of the forces that shape the guy who's the youngest head coach in the NFL. And all of it is really just pointing to me as saying that this guy is ready to do this. And I think some of the things that people are looking at now as potential concerns, drawbacks, flaws, whatever, for a first-time head coach, where we're not able to see it yet in action. I think some of those concerns have been allayed for me a little bit. I think he's truly ready for this. We'll see, obviously. We'll see how it goes. There's so much stuff that is just like outside of a head coach's control. There's so much stuff that we just haven't seen him do yet. We don't know for a fact that he's capable, but I'm feeling a little bit more confident now than I was even the day after his team won the Super Bowl.
So I think one of the things that we've talked about a lot is how many quarterbacks the Saints have interacted with that are in this draft. We've certainly talked a lot about Derek Carr. Kellen Moore's been asked a lot about Derek Carr. What's your sense on what quarterback, the entire situation from Carr to Hayner and Rattler to what this draft looks like to how quickly they want that guy in place? Like, what's your sense on quarterback?
All right, so we'll start with Derek Carr. I think I'm still thinking that I'll be just shocked if he's not the week one starter. But I think as this thing gets further and further along, I would also be surprised if he's the week one starter next year.
Yeah.
I don't think he's really in the long-term vision for Kellen Moore and the Saints franchise. I think the rest of it's harder to figure out. Jake Hayner was drafted under, with Pete Carmichael as the offensive coordinator. Spencer Rattler was drafted with Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. Neither of those guys are here now. Kellen Moore didn't draft those guys. You might want his guy in there. I think the fact that they have an unsettled long-term answer at quarterback means there's a chance that they try to address it this year, maybe with their first-round pick. I think you could argue whether that's the right move with this particular class of quarterbacks. But I think it's definitely something that has to be a part of the consideration for the Saints. And I think it's something that is part of the consideration for the Saints. Like, personally, I don't feel really comfortable with anybody outside of Cam Ward. And I definitely don't feel comfortable with what it would take to go up and get somebody like Cam Ward. I mean, look at the trade 2 years ago. The last time a team traded up from number 9 to number 1, which is what you'd have to do to get Cam Ward. DJ Moore, who is an electric, established NFL playmaker, a first-round pick, a second-round pick, the next year's first-round pick, which ended up being number 1 overall, and then this year's second-round pick. So you're talking about the waves from that trade have gone on for 3 years, and what the Carolina Panthers got out of it is Bryce Young and no ammunition to build a roster around him. Like, that's what a trade would look like this year if the Saints had to go that high to make that pick. And, like, I don't know if I really feel comfortable trying to build around a guy with no assets.
Yeah.
So that's, I think it's a really fraught situation. I think if you got to be really careful if you're the Saints, right? Like, if you're going to try to pull the trigger on like a blockbuster trade like that, first, like, Tennessee has to be willing to listen, and second, like, you're going to have to be absolutely certain as you can be in a very uncertain business of scouting quarterbacks, that he's going to be an absolute stud that is going to elevate literally everybody around him. And if you're not going to make that sort of move, I don't know. Like, I think everybody else in this class has, like, a lot of warts, a lot of stuff that would kind of scare me if I was a talent evaluator. And there's just, like, this is a team that has such a huge need for good young players. Like, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable taking a big swing when you could end up with a big miss on your hands.
Here's a question I haven't asked you yet, and I agree with everything you just said. But the question I have is, we feel like Mickey Loomis continues to operate this thing as if the Saints are really close to winning, and no one else on the outside believes that to be the case. I'm curious if you think that shapes the expectation he has for success early in the Kellen Moore era. It's
an interesting question, because like, while he is very much like a guy who sees this team as close, like, I think you also have to just acknowledge that this organization is incredibly patient, maybe sometimes to a fault. And like, I think if Kellen Moore goes out there and the team falls flat on his face, I don't know if it would be fair of Mickey Loomis to start pointing the finger at the head coach, because at some point, like, that's got to get directed back at himself. I made the point on one of our podcasts a couple of weeks ago that like, I think this season is going to be a referendum on the roster, because he's out here claiming Dennis Allen was a good coach. It never worked with Dennis Allen here. They lost 7 straight games before they fired him, and there's a lot of reasons they came up with that. But if it doesn't work under the guy you handpicked, and a guy who I think widely is viewed as a very good coach in the league, who assembled a really nice staff around him, then that's the roster. That's the roster not being as good as you think it is, and they got to take a serious look at that if that's what ends up happening.
Luke, I know you're taking a couple of weeks, so we'll catch up down the road. Enjoy some time away, and we'll be on the lookout.
Sounds good, buddy. Talk to you before the draft.
Sounds good. That is Luke Johnson, Saints beat reporter for The Advocate. I'll just kind of tease a little bit here. Luke's got a great story coming out on Kellen Moore that you'll definitely want to check out here in the coming weeks. It's not one that's going to be just like 4 inches in your paper. I don't know if anybody even goes by inches anymore because everything's online.
Really?
It's okay. An old writer line.
But I say not only do
how
people,
else would I do word count?
Yeah,
I don't
words.
But I'm not as good with that. I'm not sure what the word count sound. I know it's not going to be 200 words.
No, but either way, the fact that you said inches, when people, not only do people not read the newspaper anymore, but also you only know that
it's going to be a detailed
inches.
Feature story on Kellen Moore.
You only know that it's inches unless you were literally a writer. That's the only way.
Which I was. So you got to draw from what you got. So yeah, it's going to be a really detailed story, and I can't wait to check that out from Luke. So we appreciate a little bit of time from him. Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.